when you walk with open arms towards the sun, you feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything, 'cause you know.
Welcome to the Bassline. Dr. Sherri Peel Jackson is a courageous woman with an incredible life story. She is a leader in the tax resistors movement and has paid a heavy price for asserting her rights against the tyrannical state. She is a PhD, she is an author, she is a homesteader. I am overjoyed to welcome to the Bassline the extraordinary Dr. Sherri Peel Jackson. How are you this morning, Dr. Peel Jackson? How's everything in your neck of the woods?
It's great, sir, and thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, it's such a pleasure and an honor. I'm very excited for this program. In our End All Tyranny community, Dr. Peel Jackson was a guest last week, and I was thrilled when she agreed to an interview because, as I said in the introduction, her life story is truly incredible, and she has a lot of really amazing ideas and projects that she's involved with. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy this interview, so please spread the word. Tell everyone to tune in to prn.live. They do not want to miss this. Now, one thing we did not discuss when you were our guest in End All Tyranny last week is the COVID event, which is something that we discuss in that space normally, the harms of the vaccines, the economic devastation that resulted from the lockdowns, and all the other things that went on with that propaganda onslaught and that, I would say, aggressive action on the part of the military, medical, industrial complex that we're all subjected to. But I would be curious to hear just some of your thoughts about that, not knowing anything about what you think about COVID and the vaccine agenda and so forth. What are some of your thoughts in regard to that massive event before we get into some of the specifics of your story?
Okay, so that's one of the things that angers me so much. 2020 was a thief. It was a test to see how many of us were going to comply with their molestation of our bodies. The mandates went against everybody's core being. I mean, we just knew inside that we weren't supposed to do it. And so they took part in manipulating different people into taking poison, taking the arm charm. And, you know, there's so much that has come out since then, but I call it a pandemic, as they had a mock trial of it in 2019, and it was actually on YouTube. It was called Agenda 201. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but Absolutely. They had a mock pandemic in late 2019. So that is one reason that I know that it was a plandemic and not a pandemic. Also, certain people told me that they knew in advance. I had one client that was in law enforcement, and this client told me that they knew in advance that it was coming. They got a heads up to prepare and, you know, kind of stock up and things like that. Also, there were Congress critters that made money because they knew in advance and they bought stock in PPE prior to the onset of the pandemic. Right. Small businesses got shut down while the big box stores made millions. It didn't make any sense to me for you to be able to pile into a Sam's or a Costco with 200, 300, 400 people, but you couldn't go down to the local store with 45 people.
Right.
So, you know, logic dictates that they knew what they were doing. As a matter of fact, there is a report that I read, I think maybe towards the beginning, somebody put out, they let us know about a report that was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation in 2010. They had been planning this stuff since way before then even, but in 2010, the Rockefellers came out with a report. It was Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. And it was a forward-looking document developed in collaboration with Global Business Network, and it was exploring potential global futures, but it talked specifically about the pandemic. And I think the way it came over to me, they talked about the specific area that was called lockstep, which described a world responding to an influenza pandemic with widespread government controls. One of the major things that I saw in that, it said this is something that we can use to subdue the people. So that's what this whole thing was about, and we know what their plans are. I do believe that based on the Epstein papers, they plan on doing this again. And another reason, the flu and the common cold just disappeared. So what does that tell you?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for your thoughts there. And I agree with everything you just said completely. And something that we certainly did discuss in our End All Tyranny space is your history as a tax resister, which is just a phenomenal story and a huge issue that we're just not really discussing. There's so many issues on the table, but at the heart of it all, I would say, is this extracting of wealth from working people to invest in pandemics and all these other projects that the average person would not approve of whatsoever. And you have quite a history with this movement and have paid a very severe price for your conviction. And I would love if you just take your time and explain some of the backstory and the principles that you stand on in terms of what's happening with taxation in America.
Well, I got convicted for my convictions. I just thought about that one. That's a new slogan you made up for me. So I was an IRS agent from 1988 to 1995. I went out and audited companies. I took that job after working in corporate America, which I didn't like. And my dad always taught me not to complain. If I didn't like where I was at point A, go to point B. So I figured I was pretty good at math, and I took the job. You know, in the beginning, it was great because I got to be independent as opposed to having to work like an assembly line in corporate America. So if I did well on a case, then I was awarded. If I didn't do well, then it was my fault and my fault alone. But then I started noticing stuff like the disparities between wealthy business owners and the mom and pop. So the IRS considers mom and pop businesses low-hanging fruit. And they send the new agents specifically, and then the rest of the agents out after the low-hanging fruit. So let's say we have a business, and it's a husband and wife business, and they have a brick and mortar business. They're bringing in about $300,000 a year. They're kind of doing their finances themselves. This is what the IRS loves to go out and audit, because a lot of times they may be doing something wrong and they get money from them. However, you know, when they go out and audit the larger corporations, they're going to be faced with the attorney and the CPA. They may never see the owner. And a lot of the IRS agents aren't CPAs, so they were intimidated. So I started thinking, okay, so this is nothing different than the rest of the world. The government is fleecing middle America. The small business is the backbone of America. Now, I quit the IRS for family reasons. I was married, had 2 small children, and the IRS was getting too much of my time. They were, I wasn't working a lot of overtime, but I had some specialized cases. I had one guy that offered me a bribe, so in that case, I had to go out at night and, you know, have wires all in my chest, recording and stuff like that. It was just a little bit much. Didn't want to be like the James Bond kind of stuff. So I decided to quit the job, and that's when people started approaching me saying, hey, you know, I've heard that the income tax is being misrepresented and misapplied to the American people. And I listened to them, but it was on the back burner. Hey, these people, there's some people out there from all walks of life that think that the income tax is not for us. And in 2020, when I was working with a lot of churches, one of the pastors came to me and said, hey, one of my parishioners set up a meeting with me, and she was telling me all this stuff about how the income tax doesn't apply to us, and the income tax is taking our money and all of this stuff. And I would like you know, to listen to her. So I said, okay. And this lady literally water hosed me down with all this information that she had learned about the straw man and about the UCC and all these different things about the income tax not applying to us. And I was like, okay, that's very interesting. But I was so busy at the time, I quit the IRS, started my CPA firm, and I had, you know, some contracts that I was working and doing pretty well financially. And a couple of weeks after she called me and gave me all that information, she called me back and she said, Miss Jackson, all of that stuff that I told you is in the USA Today paper. Can you go out to a newsstand and find a USA Today paper? It was a Friday. And I went out and found a paper stand, which is kind of, you don't even notice them. And sure enough, I got the USA Today, and there was a full-page color ad in there, and it said, "Dear We the People, the income tax is a fraud." And I was like, really? This full-color 2-page ad was put out by a group called We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education. And I read the ad, and there were two things that stuck out in the ad like a sore thumb. Number one was a $50,000 challenge from a man named Bill Conklin. Bill Conklin basically was challenging with, backed by $50,000, anybody that could prove that most Americans that live and work in the 50 states are required to file an income tax return and pay an income tax. So I said, okay, $50,000, I can do this. I can go and do this research and write this man this really detailed report showing that, Americans have to owe the tax. The second thing in there was a report from a former IRS Criminal Investigation Division agent. Now, the IRS CID, I think they changed the name now, but CID, the Criminal Investigation Division, they were the agents that had the guns and the badges. We had badges, but they had the guns, and they would go out and investigate cases that were like criminal, for example, drug dealing cases and money laundering cases like that. And he, when I read his little blurb in the paper, had done an investigation into the income tax because he heard some people on the radio saying that the income tax was a fraud. He wanted to go after all of them and just kind of line them up and put them in jail. And come to find out, after 2.5 years of research on his own time, he found out that those people were telling the truth. So he wrote a report. He was still working at the IRS. His name is Joe Bannister. He wrote a report to his superior saying, hey, I've done this research, and it looks like, there's some problems constitutionally what we're doing. And, could you answer these questions? And he got a reply, we're not going to answer your questions, and we're going to give you you're going to need to take a week off to decide whether you're going to tender your resignation. So Joe was shocked that, that's the answer that came back. He took a couple of days and he quit. And then he turned this report into a book. And so I ordered 2 of these books, and I started talking openly about, the research that had been done. Then Joe called me one day. It was maybe a couple of weeks later. He had gotten my check in the mail. It was late at night because he's in California, and he said he almost fell out of his chair when he got the mail and saw that there's another agent out here. And he informed me that there was even another agent. So John Turner was a revenue officer. You had somebody from each division of the IRS. I was a revenue agent. John Turner was a revenue officer, and Joe was from the Criminal Investigation Division. And we all were invited out to California on Catalina Island to have a discussion on how to start informing the American people that our money is being stolen. Now, We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education got our pictures, and they put another ad in there, and it said, what do these 3 people have in common? They're all former IRS employees who believe that the income tax is a fraud. And then they had another ad saying, what do these 5 men have in common? They're all businessmen that stopped taking taxes out of their workers' paychecks because they believe the income tax is a fraud. After the 5th ad in the USA Today, the USA Today lawyers came to the We the People Foundation and said, we're not running any more of these ads that you've already paid for in advance because you're telling people to do something illegal. And we were not telling people to do anything. It was just a whole bunch of codes and regulations, and nobody was telling anybody. As a matter of fact, John and I made a pact that we would never tell anybody to file or not to file, or we would never tell anybody to pay or not to pay. And what I would say when I was speaking is the people have to do their own research and decide whether they want to be a slave or get off the plantation. And that used to just, make the IRS very angry. Mm-hmm. I started speaking around the country on the regular, and the IRS started to, they had congressional hearings and had our pictures blown up on easels Charles Grassley was the Senate Finance Committee chairman, and they said, we got to stop these people. We can't have them running around telling people that the income tax is a fraud. So what they did is they started prosecuting us. They prosecuted Vernie Koogman. She was a Federal Express pilot that didn't file. They lost that case, even though they came to Vernie's house and took all her stuff out later. They prosecuted Joe Bannister. He won his case out in California. I was out in Sacramento for 2 weeks at that case, and it was glorious because the jury was a thinking jury. And then Tommy Cryer was a lawyer in Shreveport, Louisiana. They tried him in July of 2007, and he won his case. Tommy wrote a 109-page memorandum as a lawyer, and it basically showed from Supreme Court cases, U.S. Supreme Court cases, and several state Supreme Court cases that income is corporate profits. So let me give you an example of what we're saying here. Jeremiah, we're going to make an agreement together, and I'm going to cut your grass for $100. You got a front yard and you got a backyard. And you're going to, in exchange for me cutting your grass, you're going to give me $100. So I'm using my arms, I'm using my legs, I'm using my brain, I'm using my life force, my time. I'll never get that time back. I'm using life force to cut your grass in exchange for $100 to feed my family. That's an even exchange. But if you look on the flip side of it, let's say the smallest Walmart in the United States yesterday, they brought in gross $100,000. But then they have to pay the salaries, they have to pay the utilities, they have to pay for all of that stuff they have in there from China, all that. And let's say all that added up to $70,000. Well, Walmart doesn't have to pay tax on the $100,000 that they brought in. They only pay tax on the $70,000. They only pay tax on $30,000. So they get to deduct $70,000 in expenses. We don't get to, quote unquote, deduct our time and energy and our life force. And that's wrong on so many different levels. So that's what Tommy was saying in his case, and he was acquitted by the jury. So I was next. 3 months later, they said we cannot afford to lose another case, because if we lose another case to these people, especially, this woman, this is a CPA and certified fraud examiner, had 9 letters behind my name, then it's all over. So they brought people down from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta to prosecute me. It was a 3-ring circus because, first of all, they wouldn't let the lawyer ask the question that I wanted to ask the jury was, would you be afraid to acquit Miss Jackson for fear that the IRS was going to come after you? And I believe that every hand would have gone up because everybody's afraid of the insidious representatives of Satan. And yes, I call the IRS the insidious representatives of Satan because they take money away from American families and do things with our money that we would never do. It's all coming out now. In California, they have, these, I guess, medical hospice centers that were in tire shops and in slop stands, and the Somalians up in, I think it's
Minnesota,
in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that had daycare centers that didn't have children and collecting millions of dollars. These are people's money that they earn for their families. And if nothing else, people should look at it from the standpoint of, you know what, if I had all the money that I made, then my family would have a nicer life. We'd be healthier. We'd be able to go on decent vacations. But no, I'm hoping that your listeners understand that the IRS is the bouncers for the club, and the club is the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve, if you look at the debt clock, you'll realize that they're collecting millions of dollars an hour in interest from the American people, and that they're not federal and there are no reserves. They're a non-auditable private banking cartel. So the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the Warburgs and Kuhn Lohm and Chase and all these people that went down to Jekyll Island back in 1913 or so, 1909, whenever it was, to cook up this demonic, dastardly thing that they did called the Federal Reserve, are policing the American people. And I had enough of it. When I found out from Ed Griffin's book that these people were doing that, I thought to myself, I was working sometimes, Jeremiah, 16 hours a day trying to get reports out the door because of my contracts. And, you know, I had that black woman snap my head back and said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. You can forget it. And so I started speaking out. When they came after me, my trial was 3 days. The jury automatically was afraid, and they convicted me on 4 misdemeanor charges. Let's go back. This was in 2007. In 2004, in July, they came and raided my house. So I'm in the basement early in the morning. I'm usually not up that early, but I was doing a letter for somebody. I had on a T-shirt and some underwear, and somebody was upstairs knocking wildly on my door. And my mother knocks like that. And I'm thinking, what in the world is she doing here this early? So I ran up to see if anything was okay. And I had red dots all over my body. So they had their laser guns pointed through the little window next to the front door. And they were saying, federal agents, open up. So I'm standing there in a T-shirt thinking to myself, I don't want to let these people in my house. But if I don't open the door, somebody's going to have a itchy trigger finger, and they're going to shoot me through the door, and my children are going to come downstairs when they wake up and see their mother laying in a pool of blood. So I opened the door, and as I stated before, for those that understand jurisdiction, the first 2 people that came inside my house were not IRS, they weren't FBI, they were DeKalb County police officers. They were county police officers. The county police officers came in and they let all those other people in.
Wow.
So I had 15 to 20 agents. I couldn't even count them. They were rushing in the house, upstairs, downstairs, everywhere, going through all our drawers. They had one in the backyard with a metal detector going in circles from the middle of my backyard trying to see if I had something buried. I don't know what these agents were told about us. But we were just a homeschooling family trying to keep what we earned. And some of them were looking very puzzled about why they were there. They had us corralled in my family room. I was angry. When I get angry, my throat dries up. They told us we had to ask for permission to go in other rooms. I wouldn't. I got up and I got some water out of the refrigerator. One of the females said, do you want to go put some clothes on? Because she had enough sense to realize I'm running around in a T-shirt and panties. And then so I went upstairs and I changed clothes into some jeans and one of my protest shirts. And then they had one agent standing in the room with us while the other ones went all around the house into my office in the basement and all that. And I stood toe-to-toe with him. I couldn't sit down. I was so angry. I just stood up like nose to nose with him. And I didn't touch him, but I was saying under my breath, you know you're wrong. You know you're wrong. You know you're wrong. And he started twitching, and he left and went and got another agent, which was taller. And I did the same thing. I stood toe-to-toe with him. And finally, my son, which was at the time 14, said, Mom, can we just go over Aunt Sharon's house? So their godmother lived around the corner. So I asked one of the agents, because they wouldn't let me use the phone. I asked, can I call their godmother so they can go? Let me back up a little bit. When they first corralled us into the family room, it had to be God that I left my little cell phone. It was a flip phone back then, in the easy chair, and it was down in the chair, so you really couldn't see it. And I have long hair, so I got it out of the chair. I slipped it on my left side, and I put it up on my ear. After I dialed, I put it up on my ear. I called another one of us that lived up north, and I said, he had been raided also. And I said, his name is Larkin Rose. I said, Larkin, I'm being raided. There's about 20 of them in the house. And he said, don't leave the house. They'll ask you, do you want to leave? If you leave, you cannot come back, and they can plant stuff. And I didn't leave, but I let the children leave, and I felt more comfortable because although they had put their guns away at the time, you know how that works. So they raided my house. It was 7:45 to 5 o'clock. They took about 32 boxes away. This was July 2004. It took them till early 2007 to even bring charges, and they could not find a felony. A felony would require an indictment. This was an information because the only thing they found about me and my family was that we were a homeschooling family just trying to keep what we earned. I did not file tax returns. Willful failure to file tax return, which is a misdemeanor charge, which I was not guilty of because the 3 things that you have to prove is that the person didn't file, which is true, the person made money, which is true, but the part that they claimed was that I knew I was supposed to file, and I knew that I wasn't supposed to file. Anyway, 4-year sentence. They scheduled the sentencing hearing for Valentine's Day 2008. I had fired the lawyer, and I was pro se, and I had some great help. The prosecution asked for an upward departure, meaning he asked for additional time because the guidelines for 3 years, it's 3 years, it's 36 months. But he asked for an additional 12 months because I was, so I guess I was out there so much telling people, to research the law. And I argued for myself, and I told them, you didn't let me talk about my case, because I did testify. And as soon as I started talking about those cases that I told you about with Tommy Cryer, the judge would say, I will instruct the jury on the law. So she basically shut me down from defending myself. But so when it was time for her to make her decision, this is what she said, and I'm going to say it in her voice. She said, I know you homeschool your children, Miss Jackson, and I know you got a lot of family support, but you can't run around the country telling people not to file income tax returns. And I looked at her in her eyes, and I said, I've never done that, because I had never done it. So that let everybody know that the prosecution wasn't about the fact that I kept my own money and didn't file. It was about me being so effective running around the country telling people to look at the tax law and look at what's going on with the tax code, and does it really apply to you? See, the income tax is a racially unifying issue. It has nothing to do with race. Everybody hates the income tax. Everybody wants to keep their own money. Nobody wants to give money to the National Endowment for the Arts so they can draw pictures of Christ upside down in a vat of urine. Nobody wants to give money to the Department of Defense so they can blow people up for their oil. All these different things that they're doing with the money. So it was they knew that it was unifying, and they needed to shut me down. So I actually spent 3 years in federal prison. The 4-year sentence, they had to give me 6 months good time, and they had to give me 6 months halfway house. So I got out 3 years to the day after they put me in there. And, I'm a strong person. I grew up, I'm originally from Detroit. So it was like my dad told me to go in there and treat it like a university. We talked about Nelson Mandela and his whole 27 years in prison and whatnot, and he treated it like a university. So while I was there, I made plans for coming out. When I came out, I said, I'm going to be better and stronger. The only thing that happened that was not better was I lost a tooth, and because if you really want to know what universal health care would be like, you'd have to look at a prison. One girl broke her leg in there playing baseball, and they took so long for her to get an appointment, and her leg was never set, so she'll never be able to run again. Wow. Stupid stuff like that. And so that was it. I came out, I got my master's degree, got my doctorate degree, and I started writing books. And I've written 10 books, and I now help people. I don't recommend anybody do what I did and try to cut the head off the beast, because they have the money and they have the guns and the so-called authority, but there are people out there that don't want to pay. So I help people that want to stay within the system, but they want to write off everything but the kitchen sink. So I'm the deduction queen, and I'm the tax strategist that's going to tell you, this is how much money you made, but let's find strategies to reduce that, as opposed to stop filing, put that target on your back, and then, lose your family. This thing caused a divorce. It caused, I came back, and it was almost like I hit rock bottom and started to dig. I had to start all over, but I did start all over, and I'm back to 6 figures, and, my life is great. But this is what they did, and this is what they do to you if you mess with the money. T.I. is a rapper here in Atlanta. He was in the prison system in Atlanta City Jail the same time I was. They let him out to let him go speak at all of these schools, and then he got caught with a weapon, and he was a felon, and they still didn't do anything with him. But a homeschooling mother, they gave 4-year sentence on a misdemeanor charge. They didn't even give one of the heirs to the DuPont paint family raped his 3-year-old daughter. Wow. And he got no prison time because the judge said he wouldn't fare well in prison. Mm-hmm. Timothy Geithner supposedly didn't pay taxes, and they didn't do anything to him. And what's his name, Randall, the congressman Charles Randall got caught with money in a freezer in one of his houses in the Dominican Republic that he was evading taxes, and he didn't get any time. But a homeschooling mother that was educating people had to spend 3 years in prison. So that's it, Jeremiah. And
Wow.
Whatever else you want to know, I'll let you know.
Yeah, that's you were creating what they call the threat of a good example, or I guess from their point of view, a bad example. Incredible story, incredible conviction that you showed to get you convicted. Sadly, but we can hear the strength in your voice. So I think more people need to know about your story and all the information that you have to share pertaining to this just fundamental subject of the taxation system. And I want to pause briefly. We are a little past the halfway mark of the program. I just want to mention different ways that you can support the Bassline. We have the 5 to 8 frequency jam session this Sunday in Harlem, and that's at Rock Mill Fitness. The address is 274 Lenox Avenue, and that's just south of 124th Street, and the doors are 3:30 p.m. Please join us. We're going to have a great time, and we'd love to see you there. Of course, we have an affiliate program with frontierfarm.com. That's farm with a PH, FRONTIERPHARM.com. And the discount code is The Bassline, capital THE space, capital BASSLINE. And if you haven't checked it out already, check out privateiptvaccess.com, code J Hosea, no space in between, capital J H, capital J, capital H OSEA. Incredible TV system to give you television stations from all around the world. Of course, I'm a chess coach. Please contact me for a chess lesson, remotelearningchess.com. Check me out on Substack. I'm about to publish a new article, so that's jeremiahhosea.substack.com. Please become a paid subscriber if you can, but if not, certainly become a free subscriber right away and help spread the word about my articles and about this program, The Bassline, and jeremiahhosea.com, where you can check out my original music, including the theme song of this show. I need to pay for an SSL certificate, which it was kind of annoying. I noticed my website wasn't coming up on some browsers, so I'll take care of that as soon as possible. So maybe you have to open up Jeremiah Hosea on like Mozilla or one of these other browsers, because it seemed to be getting blocked by Chrome, which was annoying. But those are a variety of ways you can support this program. And of course, check out also the relatively new YouTube channel. Just look up The Bassline Podcast on YouTube. Again, BASSLINE, and make sure to subscribe, where all the interviews we've done here. This is episode 140, actually, but all the episodes are uploaded one by one, and you can listen to the interviews and share them through the YouTube platform. Also, quickly, if you would like to call, we'd love to hear from you. This is a community radio station. This is the Progressive Radio Network, so please get in the queue. It's 888-874-4888. Hopefully you already have that secured on your phone, 888-874-4888. So I would like to ask you, Dr. Peel Jackson, when you did so much research and so much academic work while incarcerated, did you actually get your degrees while incarcerated, or was that after?
That was after.
Okay. Yeah, just wanted to know that little detail. And I guess, could you share, before I ask you this next question, I wanted to just ask you just some of your thoughts in terms of the prison industrial complex. That was actually one of my main focuses in my personal activism before I got so heavily involved in the health freedom movement was just the terrible injustice that is perpetrated every day through the prison industrial complex. I mean, there's so many things that I could say about that. I mean, one thing that is so atrocious and unacceptable is that you have judges who are stockholders in the prison industry. So how can they administer justice properly when they profit off of every person who's incarcerated, rightfully or wrongfully? But what are some of the key thoughts that you would convey in terms of the prison industrial complex, having seen it from the inside out?
Oh, it's definitely a racket. As a matter of fact, my first few books were about the prison industrial complex. I wrote one called Questions About Prison Life, Answers from a Former Political Prisoner, and I let it all out. I mean, it's a whole racket. I was in a prison camp, and we were paid like 12 cents. The girls that worked out in the factories made, $1.45, and all of these goods going to the GSA. It's a racket, and one of the prisons that I was in, GEO owned. So GEO Group is the same people that own Guantanamo Bay. So the music industry, I found out, has a lot to do with it. So they pay these people to do these vile songs, and the more they do, then the people follow that, and they go to prison, and they have a certain quota. So they have to have something happen to keep the quota going up, and it's a racket. And so we need to know as people that the school to prison pipeline, we've got to stop that right at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, I'm a musician. I'm a songwriter as well. And, it used to be so much, there was so much craftsmanship involved in songwriting. I remember reading Duke Ellington's biography, Music is My Mistress, and he would craft a song and take it down to a Midtown office, and they would submit songs that would be, I guess, purchased for licensing or different arrangements. But, you would make a modest income, at least as a successful songwriter. And there was just, again, so much craftsmanship involved in that. And nowadays, what you call a song is just like grunting and groaning and profanity over a beat. I mean, it's like you would be sent straight to a mental asylum if you took this to the songwriting house and said, here, I wrote this song, and now it's a hit song, when you just say a few vulgar lines and repeat them 100 times over a repetitive beat. It's unbelievable how much contemporary music has just been dumbed down, and it's just undercomposed, underarranged, and the lyrics in so many cases are not just bad lyrics. We would have to use the word reprehensible. I mean, they are teaching young people things that just should not even enter a human mind, let alone the innocent mind of a young person in their formative development. We actually have a caller on the line. We have Ronald on the line. How are you, Ronald?
Hey, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you this time. Welcome. It's Ronald F. Owens Jr., the legend. How are you, brother?
All right.
I'm doing well. Yeah, I just want to commend Dr. Jackson for being a strong warrior of truth. I really want to commend her for that, and respect to her and her mother and her father, because I know she comes from great stock.
Yeah.
I'm the public information officer for former public information officer, and I like talking points. So give me a succinct talking point where I can share amongst the people that I interact with regarding the federal income tax. We're not mandated. We're not required. Give me a great sentence so I can use that moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Ronald.
Oh, that's a loaded question, because there's so much, and they've made it that way. They've made it that way because it's basically the income tax applies to foreigners and foreign corporations for the privilege of working over here. It's not supposed to apply to Americans that live and work in the 50 states, but what they do is they trick the IRS computers and make us those people that are supposed to owe. For example, your transcript might say that you run liquor, and then that is a Title 27 profession that has to pay income tax.
Wow. Yeah, one thing that I always thought about the tax code is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's just such an extensive document. I think I heard it's 15,000 pages of code language and all the legalese of that document. That is it fair to say that there's not really a person in the world who's actually read the tax code comprehensively? Is it more than any one person could even read or comprehend realistically?
Well, as it grows, but a lot of people have sat down and read it, and now we have AI, and basically we understand that there's so much contradiction in, for example, Title 27 tells you who owes, how they owe, how much they owe, but Title 26, there's not even a definition of income. There's no definition of income in the code. They have taxable income, gross income, net income. They don't have a definition of income. And what Tommy Cryer found is that Shreveport lawyer, income is corporate profits.
Wow. Incredible. We also have now Noel on the line. How are you, Noel? Thanks for calling.
Hi, Jeremiah. Nice to speak. Yeah, I would like to ask Ms. Jackson, where does she get her strength from and continue to get her strength?
I'm a hardline Christian. I don't back in the door about it. I know who I am. I have strong parents. My father is very pragmatic. My mother is very creative, and both of them were entrepreneurs. So it's like, and I come from Detroit. I think that's enough said. I grew up in Detroit in the 60s. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. You weren't one of the Supremes, were you?
I was not, but my dad knew them.
Wow.
Okay, that's all. Are you going to give some contact information at the end?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Jeremiah, for doing wonderful. One of these days I'll come up to Harlem and see you, but I'm a little busy doing my own thing because, like Miss Jackson, even though I wasn't incarcerated, I worked for the Department of Education. I'm a veteran, and I was fired because of the criminals, the New York City area between Bill de Blasio and Eric Adams.
Yeah.
And I'm creating my own thing, and I'll eventually say it on the air what I'm doing. So shame on you for firing good people. Thank you.
Yeah, shame on them. I agree.
Right.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, don't get me started with the conditions here in New York City. I just find it unbelievable, particularly, I've been criticizing Mamdani on social media. And my animosity towards Mamdani is because he doubled down on the dehumanizing vaccine mandates. He said plainly that if you lost your job because you didn't comply, that you should not have your job restored, even years later, which I take that as a very aggressive statement against the working public. And I find it such a contradiction that he claims to be a socialist and all this kind of stuff when he's a millionaire. And like Gary Null said, is he opening up his $1 million estates for people to live? Is he redistributing his wealth? And
he's a hypocrite.
Yeah, he's a total hypocrite. And and what's amazing is, I take photos of the subway tracks, and I hate to be disgusting, but in my neighborhood, when you enter the train station, you look down into the tracks, it looks like there's a river of diarrhea flowing through the center of the tracks. And this is in New York City. So why would people go out of their way to defend that? When I post these pictures, they say, oh, well, it's always been like that. Well, why do you accept it? And why do you defend the people who maintain these deplorable conditions? I just find it amazing the degree of Stockholm syndrome that people are suffering from at this time. We have one more caller, and we have a couple more important things we need to touch on, but let's hear from Max on the line now.
Yeah.
How are you, Max?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Okay, 2 quick points. I wasn't going to mention the mayor. However, when he kept the same police commissioner, I knew it was all over them.
Right.
He didn't bother changing the police commissioner from the previous mayoral, whatever they're called.
Yeah.
So I don't believe politicians anyway, but that was such a slap in the face if he was starting a new socialist empire. The police commissioner had to go.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just common sense, even if he wasn't a bad one.
Yeah.
He was an old one. He was old guard, and they needed new guard, and still do. The other point that I wanted to make, Dr. Jackson, in truth, the income tax law was never ratified, period. End of story. It wasn't a matter of how they enforced it. It wasn't ratified by 2/3 Congress. So it never became a law. They just said, just like they did during the pandemic, you got to do it, so people did it instead of doing what you did and said, well, why? And did the math. And last but not least, you pay taxes now? Okay, I'll be still.
Bill Benson was a friend of mine before he passed away. He was the one that wrote the 2 volumes of The Law That Never Was. He went around to all 48 states, the contiguous states, and got the documented, certified copies of the vote for the 16th Amendment and showed that it was never ratified. And the Congress and the government basically says, oh, it doesn't matter because it's not based on the 16th Amendment for that. I pay taxes that are due. I pay all taxes that are due. How about that? We have certain taxes that we have to pay, gas taxes, and there are ways that you can stay within the system but not have to pay any tax or just a little tax. If you do not want to risk your family, I have doctors, I have people with engineering companies, and they say, I don't want to pay taxes. I know this is a fraud, but I have a family, and I don't want them coming after me because they ignore the law. They will ignore the law. They don't care what it says. But these people can still enjoy life if they understand, the tax strategies that are out there. For example, there are so many credits out there that, remember in 2016 and Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were debating, and Hillary said Donald Trump didn't pay his taxes, and everybody sucked all of the wind out of the room. And then everybody called me. Did you know Donald Trump didn't pay his taxes? And I'm like, I don't have TV. I don't deal with TV. So I looked online the next day, and sure enough, Donald Trump said, I'm a smart man. Well, he's a smart man because he has tax strategists, and the tax code was written for businesses. 95% of the people in the United States are employees. You don't get to deduct anything. You don't get to deduct your cell phone. You don't get to deduct your internet or your mileage or anything like that. And we need to start paying attention to where our money goes and learning instead of turning on the electronic income reducer every day, which is what I call the TV. We need to make sure that we understand how to keep our money in our pockets. Yeah.
No, I appreciate the answer. However, just a little qualification that we just keep doing it, and just like they just mandated, said you got to take a shot, but they didn't hold a gun on people. Okay, I know they made it arbitrary with, their jobs and their schooling and whatnot, but you sound like a very strong, determined person, and I revere that. When are we going to at some point we have to take a stand?
We are taking a stand, and I think, Jeremiah, that leads to me talking about what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
My family, my dad just turned 83 on April 12th, and my mom turned 82 on April 16th. They divorced when I was 14. One lives on one side of town, and one lives on the other side of town, and I'm an only child, so I can't continue to run like this. And so we're getting homestead property. My house is for sale. I have some property in South Fulton County that's for sale, and we're going to buy something that's 15-plus acres and have mom and dad and all the children and grandchildren and everybody like it used to be a long time ago when grandma lived around the corner and auntie was down the street. So with the homestead somewhere, let's say southeast of downtown Atlanta, I also property on the Afro-Caribbean coast of Costa Rica. So I am building a master planned 54-acre shipping container community down there as my plan B, and then I have some property in the hills. So Middle of Paradise Hills is growing. I'm still buying the land in Middle of Paradise Beach. I'm still buying the land on that and going through all of the regulations and the permits and all that other stuff like that. But, hopefully and prayerfully by the end of this year, we'll have our homestead here. And then by the end of next year, we'll have our homestead ready in Costa Rica. And any like-minded people that want to have a plan B, because see, Oprah has her island. What is that guy's name? Charles Bronson or whatever his name is that owns Virgin Airlines. He has them. Richard Branson. They all have islands. Ted Turner has 1,000 acres in Montana.
Epstein
and
Island.
When are we as people going to start doing this?
Yeah, and you have incredible food sources on your estate in Costa Rica, correct?
Yes,
Can you tell us about some of these trees that you've grown?
do. So the house that I live in, I bought a house, and it has coconut tree in the back, and it's papaya in the front. But the land that is near the beach that we purchased, that house has soursop, limes, pineapples, cacao, and coconuts. When the grocery stores close in the United States, there's going to be pandemonium. And the grocery stores close in Costa Rica, we just go out in the backyard and get us something to eat.
Right. Yeah, sounds like a great plan that you're executing there. And it's amazing that you're also providing housing security and food security for 4 generations of your family, correct?
Yes, that's right. That's right. My parents, myself, my children, my grandchildren, and a whole bunch of cousins.
Yeah, phenomenal. We only have a couple minutes left. I don't think we'll have a chance to get to another caller, unfortunately, because I'd like you to take the time to just say all the places where people can follow you, how people can contact you perhaps, how people can purchase your books. Tell us all that info clearly and slowly.
Okay. I have a YouTube channel, and I will be going live tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern, and I will be talking about AI and how AI will change our lives in the next few years. My YouTube channel comes up as Sherri Peel Jackson, and I think it also comes up as Thrive with Sherri. So it's at Thrive with Sherri. That's my handle. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and X. I think you either go to Sherri Peel Jackson or at Thrive with Sherri. I think X is SPOJ. My books and my regular consulting packages are on my website, which is SherriPeelJackson.com. Now, Peel is P as in Peter, E-E-L, like they used to call me in elementary school. That's not a hyphenated name, Jeremiah. That's my middle name. I changed it to my maiden name to my middle name when my brother passed away, because he was the last of our of the Peels. So I changed my name to Sherri Peel Jackson. Peel was my middle name. So orange peel, potato peel, all that stuff they used to call me in elementary school. SherriPeelJackson.com is where you can scroll over to, I think, resources or something like that. And the books are there and consulting packages. And also, I just launched a year-long business wealth activation boot camp. We're in trouble here. The excrement is about to hit the portable cooling device in the United States. I have no faith in this government at all. So I'm doing this effort to take a year-long training people. This class is normally $25,000 because I'm training you for a whole year. I've had people that learn in the first week how to save over $20,000 on their taxes. But this boot camp is only $5,000. That boot camp can be found at activateyourbusiness.live. Activateyourbusiness.live. That starts on the 7th of May, and the boot camp also gives anybody the opportunity to earn money because there's a referral program in there. So even if you don't join the boot camp, if you refer people and they join, you get money. Because I'm serious I sat there and I said, how can I bring people in at this last hour here with Trump and all those, and he's not in charge. The people that are in charge, you don't know what they look like.
Yeah.
How can I bring people to a point where they're going to take the time to learn what they need to learn so that they will not be caught up in the next pandemic? And this is it. So you can get in touch with me at sherripeeljackson.com. My email is connect@sherripeeljackson.com. And that boot camp, again, is activateyourbusiness.live.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sherri Peel Jackson. You are truly an inspiration. And please, everyone who heard this interview, circulate it widely. It will be uploaded shortly. You go to thebaseline.podbean.com, and please let people know about this courageous woman and how she's educating people and leading by example. So we're out of time, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, a great weekend. Please join us this Sunday, and please tune in tonight with Dr. Peel Jackson's presentation tonight. And then when that's finished, please swing over to End All Tyranny. We're going to be doing the Bassline Extra and further follow up on this conversation and other things that we discuss on this program. So take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. Thank you again, Dr. Peel Jackson.
Thank you so much for having me on.